Hi there guys, it's Nick from Rushmoor Painting and Decorating, and this evening I'm going to be giving you a product review. The product I'm going to be reviewing is the Wolf Brush. It's a brand called the Wolf Brush Company. They make paintbrushes and roller sleeves. They're relatively new to the painting and decorating industry, and they are from America. I'm the first person in the UK to get my hands on these brushes, so I was very lucky and quite smug but very happy. And what I had to do was to put them to the test on the UK scene as such, try them out in the paints that we've got here. Some of them are American paints, some of them are stuff that they have never even been put into before, so it was really interesting to see how they'd get on. I tested them out for a month. I got given them a month ago, and today is the day that I am putting out my review on them. So let's go back to day one when I got them, and the first thing which I saw, which was the packaging, the livery. It's quite a nice packaging, very basic, but at the same time quite easy on the eye in terms of being attractive. It's not over the top or too much. It's quite simple but effective. They've got the logo there, the Wolf Brush logo, the Wolf Brush Company logo. It's quite a nice logo. I think it's quite cool. It's quite different, you know, incorporating the wolf onto that hill. It's quite a nice look to it. Tells you what brush they've got on them, as do all paintbrush covers, you know. A bit of information about them and where they're from. Same there, bit of information about where they are made. The inside has got two sections, again like most brush packets, like that. One side has got a bit of information about the filaments, the ferrule and stuff, and then the other side has got a bit of information about how to the pre-painting steps to using the brush before painting. So for example, with a water-based paint, you would dampen the bristles with water or a paint conditioner like Floetrol or a latex extender, and that helps with the flow of the bristles in the paint. And then when cleaning it out, or if you're using it in a solvent-based paint, you would put white spirit on and do the same thing, and gets the same effect really. So that's pretty much the packet covered. So it's quite an attractive packet. And then when you take the brush out of the packet, it's a similar thing. It's quite an attractive brush, quite easy on the eye. One thing that definitely stands out straight away is the ferrule, being copper. It's not a very common thing to have on a brush nowadays, copper ferrule. It's very old-fashioned as such. They tend to rust quite easily. They state that the bristles, the ferrule on this don't rust over time. So I've only had this brush for a month and I haven't yet had any experience on it rusting, but in a year it might not. I couldn't say that for sure, but they've said that it won't rust, so they wouldn't say something and then it does the opposite, you know. They wouldn't want themselves to be open like that for complaints, so I assume they're staying true to their word, and these ferrules do not rust. Another thing as well, it's got 3 pins that hold the ferrule in place, which is quite a nice little feature, because over time, being a wooden handle, it expands and contracts with the moisture and then the drying out, and it takes a bit of a battering, so you'd be surprised at how loose they can come. And the fact that it's got a pin in there to hold it in place, only on the bigger brushes, mind. On the smaller ones you don't really need it, because obviously there's a less surface area, so it doesn't need that extra one. But that is going to ensure that that ferrule stays in place for a longer period of time, which is good. The handle is pretty basic. It's nothing, you know, that we haven't seen before, I suppose. One thing I will say is it's got this little curve, which is quite nice for your finger to sit in, so it makes it nice and comfortable. Then we move on to the bristles. Another thing that stands out, not as much as the ferrule, but it still stands out quite nicely, is that they're black. And no, they're not pure bristle, it's synthetic. So that's one thing that I was a bit, you know, I was wondering about. I was kind of intrigued as such, because you don't really get black synthetic bristles. As soon as I saw them I was like, are these pure bristle? I wasn't 100% sure, but they do state that they're nylon pro polyester, What they are good for, I'm not 100% sure what they're designed to be used on. They say for all paints, but or multi-purpose, sorry, but I think there's pros to them and cons to them. And one of the cons to them is they feel a bit thick for this is my initial thought before I even put it into any paint, was that they feel too thick for fine finish work. They're a bit too thick, the bristles. They're not as soft and as fine as maybe like a Purdy Nilox or a Worcester silver tip or something like that, you know, something that's more softer, that's got a nicer you know, a softer tip to it. These are very, very thick and they've got a medium stiff bristle, so they wouldn't work very well in a fine finish paint. So I sort of knew before I even used it that that's not what it would be good for. What it feels like is like a Chinex or a Chinex bristle. That's what it feels like. It's not that, they don't call it that, they haven't said that it's that, but that's what it feels like before you use it. So I was expecting it to be good for pushing paint along, for cutting in, because it's got a good, you know, it's not stupidly stiff, but it's got a good firm feel to it. So I knew that it would be able to hold itself and create a good line before I'd used it. The only downside to the actual brushes in terms of what I would have liked to have had is the 2" is an angled, but the 2.5 is a flat. I would like to have had it the other way around, so this would have been an angled, because I prefer the brushes I use for cutting in, I prefer them to be an angled. I had to adapt my technique slightly to get used to this, which was fine, and I was fine with that. I was able to do that. So moving on to the actual painting side of things, it put on a lot of paint. It holds a lot of paint, and not only does it hold a lot of paint, it puts that paint that it's holding onto the wall. You can feel how far the paint goes compared to another brush that maybe isn't designed or isn't as good as pushing paint onto surfaces. This definitely pushes paint onto surfaces very similarly to the Chinex or the Chinex brush or bristles. It definitely pushes paint very far, which is really good. And again, like I said, before I used it, I knew that it would cut well, and it did. Despite the fact it's not an angle like I'm used to, and I had to adapt my technique slightly or adjust my technique, I was able to achieve some really nice, sharp, clean lines with this, and not ones where you're only doing a couple of inches or a foot at a time. You can get a good, nice run on this. So it works really well for high productivity on walls. It didn't work so well on woodwork, and I said that before. I said that I knew it wouldn't be as good for woodwork just by feeling it, and it wasn't. It's not a woodwork brush. I know Wolf make another brush, which I've seen but not used because they're the only two I've got, and I feel maybe that might be better for woodwork. It's got maybe finer bristles, but I can't comment on that because I haven't used it. Another thing I noticed, another pro about it, is that it's very light. So it's light before you load it, and it's light when it's loaded. It's not a heavy brush when you're using it all day, which is really nice, because obviously holding it all day, you don't want to get wrist cramps or, you know, finger cramps and stuff like that. So it feels nice to hold because it's light, and when you're using it, it's light, and it also holds its shape well. It doesn't flare and sag and bend and twist and stuff like that. It holds its shape all day. You could have that in the paint from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the evening and not clean out once, and it will hold its shape all day long. Which then leads me to talk about the paint, the cleaning side of the paintbrush. Because I've used it on some occasions where it's been on the go all day, cleaning it out is an absolute breeze. And again, it's very similar to the Chinex. This is very similar on a lot of levels to the Chinex bristle brushes. It cleans out well, similar to them. You don't have to give it a lot of scrubbing time with a wire brush. You could almost just use your thumb, you know, or your fingernail and on your fingers or your thumb, just to scratch any of the paint off. It comes off so easily. You could clean this brush after having used it all day. You could clean this brush out in 3 minutes, I reckon, with a good amount of pressure coming out of a hose. it's a very quick procedure cleaning this out. It's a very nice brush to clean out, and all round on walls and ceilings, it's a good solid brush. I mean, I rate this probably 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10 for walls. I think it's a good quality brush. It does what it's supposed to do for a consistent amount of time. It doesn't let you down throughout the day. You don't have to keep cleaning out or declagging it and stuff like that. It goes on and on and on and on all day long. It's a good little workhorse, and I believe there's definitely a place in my my box of brushes, my arsenal of paint brushes for this brush. I mean, if I was to be going out and buying a brush and this was on the shelf, I wouldn't hesitate to buy it, knowing what it's like now. Maybe if I hadn't used it, I would be a bit skeptical, but having used it now, I would gladly go and buy more of these brushes, or would buy more of these brushes if they were available in the UK. So I think there's definitely a place for them in the UK. Obviously, trying to establish yourself as a paintbrush company when there's so many around already is going to be a very, very hard thing to do. There's a lot of brushes out there, and there's a lot of brush companies out there that make very good quality brushes. You got Purdy, Worcester, Corona, the new brands in the market like Monarch and Proform, and there's so many around, and they've all got their place. There's not a one brush does all. There's not a one brush does everything well, because there is always going to be a product that it doesn't work in that you're going to need another brush for, and then there's going to be another product that you need another brush for. So you can never have too many brushes. So I believe that although they're not in the UK yet, I believe that there's definitely a place for Wolf brushes in the UK. If companies like My Paintbrush or Decorating Direct, guys like that can get a few over and just hand them out and get guys using them, just to give their feedback as well as my own feedback, just to see how they feel and if they like them or not. Obviously, my opinion is completely different to everyone else's opinions. You might not like them, I like them, you might not, each to their own. I can't say for sure if you'll all like them, but I think there's definitely going to be a few decorators out there that would appreciate this brush for the productivity reasons that it brings, the cutting in ability, and the fact that it cleans out so easily. I think, going back to the cutting in, if I was to have that in a 2.5 inch angled or a 3 inch angled, I would be rating it even higher, but because I haven't had that opportunity to use a big angle brush, I can't say for sure about its cutting in ability. I'm not going to rate it against my favourites like a Worcester Ultra Pro Firm for cutting in, because I've got that in a bigger size and an angled, whereas this is a flat, so it's sort of unfair to compare yet. But yeah, definitely feel there's definitely a space on the market for them, and I am really happy that Wolf sent me out them to test and try out. So I mean, I can't really say much more about a paintbrush than what I have already. I've tested out in many products over a good month and a bit on different substrates and things like that, so I feel I'm well qualified to say whether it's a good brush or not, and I do think it is a good brush. So there's definitely, like I said, there's definitely a place for it on the UK market. So yeah, I think I can't really say much more than that without boring you to death. So yeah, if you like my review, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, give me some feedback. If you don't like it, give me a thumbs down, but give me a comment, give me some feedback. I want to know what you didn't like about it. Head over to my Instagram page, Rushmoor100, my Twitter page, Rushmoor100, my Facebook, Rushmoor Painting and Decorating, and subscribe to my YouTube channel below. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you like it, and stay tuned for my next review.